Congresswoman, you have been around the northeastern part of the country today, Union County and now in Colfax County. You talked to a lot of people. What did you learn today?
So we've been doing two key things today. I call it our Rural Hospitals at Risk Tour, because we know that with the legislation that is being proposed, the big reconciliation bill, I don't call it beautiful. I think it is. I think it is basically a betrayal of the American people, especially rural America, in order to benefit billionaires. But I need to hear directly from people who are going to be impacted. So I went to the hospital in Union County, and I went to the Miners Hospital. I also went and tried to spend $6.16, which is what people who get SNAP benefits get a day, and see what it would be like. Could I buy a meal for myself with that much money at a market? You really can't.
No, it's not. Union County Hospital, Union County General Hospital has struggled for several years. I was born and raised in Clayton, so I've kept up with it. It's one of those small hospitals at one point in time. They closed, they opened. They've managed to keep it going, fortunately, for the folks over there. What are we going to be able to do to help keep that facility open? Because when they remodeled and rebuilt, it's turned into quite a facility.
It's a wonderful facility, and it's so essential to be able to provide service, because we need to remember that hospitals are not just a place where you go and get care. They are essential to the life of a community, because people want to live where they know that if something happens to them, they're going to be able to get care. If you're a pregnant woman, or her husband, or the family that loves her, you want to know that when it comes time to give birth, or if there's a complication, you're going to get care, right? And so hospitals serve that role, but they also serve an economic role, because they are often major employers in the community. And there is something about a hospital, knowing it's there, that gives you peace of mind. So it serves all that purpose. Miners Hospital does the same thing here in Raton. And we want to keep those hospitals going. Right now, the big bill would actually slash the funding that these rural hospitals rely on in two ways. One, it would kick about nationwide, it would kick about 14 people off of Medicaid. Some of those people live in Union County, some of those people live in Colfax County. And indeed, you have maybe 20%, 30%, depending on which hospital, are relying on Medicaid patients. It's not the primary. The primary is Medicare over in Clayton. But there also would be slashing $530 billion from Medicare. Now remember, Medicare is something that seniors have paid into all their lives. And to be cutting that much money for Medicare, and why? That's a question I was asked. And I'm telling you why. It's to give tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans. If you earn more than $3 million a year, this is a good bill for you. If you rely on Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, education benefits, this is not a good bill for you. But I need to hear from the people. So I heard from a conservative woman who said, listen, people need to know that my kids work in ranches, and they need to rely on Medicaid, because you don't earn enough.
We don't have a health insurance program for ranch
exactly people. And our ranches, I want to make sure that our ranches can continue in existence. But those ranches need to make sure that either their own families or people they employ have access to health care, and Medicaid provides that. And that's why we need a fight to keep Medicaid. But I needed to hear directly from the administrators, I heard from a mother today who she suffers from seizures, and she has several children, and one of them suffers from a rare disease that does not allow his bones to grow bone, but they get fibrous. Now he relies on Medicaid to be able to live a normal life. But he's also at risk any day. He could break something and break a femur. He needs to be able to get to a hospital right away. Imagine if you took Medicaid away from that family.
Right.
Both the mother, who needs it so her seizures are controlled so she can work, and then the child, through no fault of his own, has a condition that requires health care that she cannot afford.
Right. Now, one of the arguments to that is that if the billionaires have more money to reinvest, then more money gets run around in the economy. Of course, there's an argument with that both directions.
So what we saw was the last, because this is an extension of the Trump tax cuts from 2017. And what we saw in that go-round is they didn't reinvest it in the community. And the reality is, look around. How many people in Colfax County and Union County are earning more than $3 million? How many investments are they going to be making in our community? And that's just not a reality. They go and buy more stuff. How many yachts do you need?
Right, and that's the other argument to that tax cut, or take the money away from here and give it to here. Will they reinvest it? And of course, as you have said, many of them have not. Now, over in Colfax County, of course, right now, MCMC is going to be looking for a new CEO, and they're kind of on that budget deal as well, to where they need to make sure they've got that money coming in. Fortunately, MCMC does have the Miners Trust Fund to fall back on, but we're still much like Union County, where we still need that, and we need that care. The problem that both us and Union County, fortunately they got Dr. Van Wormer over there, but here in Colfax County, we've had trouble keeping doctors. How are we going to be able to attract and keep more doctors in the rural areas to provide those services when, if they're not here, where are you going to go?
Right. So there's two really big concerns I think your question raises. One is, if there is uncertainty as to whether the hospital you're going to go work at is not going to have adequate funding, you might not want to go work there. You want to go someplace where there's more certainty. So that creates a risk. And we know that there is the money that you get here because it is you do treat minors, you do great work on that. But the issue of that I'm very concerned about is OBGYN. There's nowhere else in 100 miles where you can deliver a baby.
Right.
Except for here. And in Clayton, because of a program they are doing called the Rome program, where they are using your obstetricians, your gynecological people here, they have not had an emergency room birth because women are getting the prenatal care they need. Right. That is one of those ones where, because they are losing money on that, but Medicaid and the funding that comes through Medicaid through the state supplements that, they're able to keep that important program. What happens when you lose that? What we heard from a father today who said, I had to take my wife over the pass in December to deliver our first baby. If we wouldn't have gotten that care here, that was before you had the care here. Right. They said we might have moved away because I was too afraid of what could have happened to her.
Of course.
Right.
I mean, December, going across the pass.
Right. Right. And so now you have that there, so that gives peace of mind. But you need to be able to attract people, and you need to be able to attract them into a community. And often people will come to a community like this, right? This beautiful,
we are in the Shuler Theater, yes.
I love this theater. I love the backdrop. I love how you have restored it. These small communities attract people because there's a beauty in them. There's a beauty about community. There's a beauty about being able to get along with lots of different people, whether they are the same party of yours or whether they're ranchers or not ranchers. There's an ability to understand that you are part of something bigger. That is a small community. And I think that can attract people, but they need to have certainty about health care. And then the other piece that we're concerned about is the cuts to the nutrition programs. If you look around when you are sitting in the theater here, 1 in 6 people, like over here, like that one, that person, that person, that person.
Right.
needs help being able to have enough food on the table to eat during the month. One of the things I did was go to a grocery store and say, I've got $6.16 for myself and $6.16 for my child.
Right.
Will I be able to feed us 3 meals a day on that? We were able to get 1 meal.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
I had, we could not have a salad because the salad would have cost us too much money. We were able to buy a cucumber. So we got a cucumber, a chicken, some chicken thighs for the $1.69 a pound. We were able to get a couple of those, but we ended up with basically 1 meal. That's not 3 meals. A child needs 3 meals.
Right.
And so we're not talking about a lot of money. So when you're taking $6.16 away in order to give a tax cut of over $700,000 to somebody who's making more than $3 million, that's just not right. That's not how society should work. We're having too much income inequality, and people are upset about that.
Right.
They want things to be more fair, more even, more just. And I think that's legitimate.
Right.
I've been thinking about St. John the Baptist. One of the things he said was, he who has 2 tunics, he who has two tunics should give one away to he who has none.
Right.
Right. And this bill does the opposite. Instead of saying, if you've earned well, you do well, maybe you pay a little more in taxes. This one says we are going to take money from the working class, from the poor, and redistribute it up. It's the biggest transfer of wealth to the wealthy ever. It's even bigger than the 2017 because of these cuts to the child tax credit, to everything. The people in the working class, $50,000 and below will actually see about $1,400 less money than they would if it didn't pass because of the hits to Medicaid.
Well, then that comes into small rural communities. What do they have in the way of jobs? Raton used to have the mine. That supplied a lot of jobs, well-paying jobs. Right now, we don't. We are having to rethink where we're at and what we provide. And of course, tourism is going to be one of the things that we have got to rethink on how we do that. And of course, with the acquisition of the Bartlett Mesa Ranch and all of that stuff, we have created a very large, very attractive playground, so to speak, because we've got a lot of hiking, hunting, fishing. I like to tell people that, hey, come to Raton, spend the night. You can fish in a different lake, stream for 7 days. So we've got that tourism thing that we need to work on and need to work. However, we've got to finish paying for all of that. And, we say thank you to you guys because you were in part helpful with that.
Yeah, we want to. And we have always come, whenever, I've come to Raton, I sat in this theater and I listened to veterans for hours when they were trying to close down the community, the CBOC, and we kept it open. We kept it open because we showed up and we listened, and that's what we're doing now, is we want to make sure that people make their voices heard regarding this bill. But I also came back, and Raton told me they wanted the film studio, and we was like, okay, you tell me. I'm not going to second guess for you. That's what you want.
Right.
You've got that money. I know you're working on where would it best fit. You also wanted to look at, does the ports to plane corridor, could that be beneficial for you? Because maybe people will stop. They get on that ports to plane corridor and they take a right and go up to It's so beautiful up here. The
way that is working right now, we get the tourism because most of the traffic through here is cars, cars and pickups.
Yeah.
The trucks are going up 385 up through Oklahoma and that way because they don't want to have to climb the pass. And that's where a lot of that's going. So we're missing out on that. But we are here, like I said, available to do hunting, fishing, hiking, 7 days a week.
7 days a week, that sun shines, and so when it doesn't, it'll rain and then it'll come back out again, so come back over. It is a beautiful area, and I think that Raton, I've been impressed with the way you're thinking about what can we do, right? We can only do so much lamenting, it's closed, it's done. So what else do we do? What are the other resources we have? Tourism, outdoor recreation. We passed some good laws last year to encourage outdoor recreation. And so I want to see more of that implemented. Now, they did not fund those programs because you can't, when I was complaining about that, it's like, you can't build a house. And then after I said something, one of the Republicans came up to me and said, you made a very good point. The way I think about it is we're building these houses and they're not putting in the electricity, so you can't go live in them. And he said, right, the electricity is the funding. But we will continue to try to support that and to try to support the other things that Colfax County raises with us, because that's our job, is to come and ask you and listen to you. What are your issues and how can we partner with you to make that happen? Because everybody, I think, has the American dream of you want to be able to, like this mother, right? Have a baby, make sure you're able to give birth, it's a healthy baby, that child is not hungry at school, is able to learn. When that child then decides, do they want to be a rancher, a welder, or a doctor, or a teacher, we've had the education system that supports it. They get a job that is not just pays a minimum wage or a livable wage, but a wage that allows you to buy a home of your own, that you have the respect in that job, and then that you can retire with dignity, with Social Security and a retirement account. People want that you're part of a community that is loving and cohesive. And you might get mad at your neighbor for this and that, but you realize that you are together, that you are part of something bigger than yourself. And I think that is an America that we still have, and that we can still support and call forth. And that we don't need to get into. We're in a moment of division right now, but I think we're going to be ready for a moment of cohesion and unity, that we will get to that point.
We've got broadband being installed in Raton. Raton is way behind on that.
A little behind.
As far as that goes, but we do have broadband. What are we going to be able to do? We've got to create some jobs to keep our young people here. Of course, broadband gives them the opportunity of remote work, but what are we going to be able to do? We had the mine. There was a lot of industry with that, in the way of support industry and stuff. We don't have that now. What are we going to have to do? How do we need to change our mindset to either create those jobs, figure out how to create those jobs, or either bring in the remote job to this part of the country?
So one of the reasons why I was such a big supporter of broadband, and I'm actually the co-chair of the Rural Broadband Caucus. Like, I really pushed that when we sent that money out, that it had to go not just to the cities, that it had to come to the rural areas. It's taken a little longer than I would have liked, but it's finally making it to the rural areas, because you are absolutely right. That broadband, you can go and get, like I've talked to New Mexico Tech and some other places, where you can learn to code. We're going to need a lot of security. AI, people talk about AI all the time. Well, you know what? There's going to need to be a lot of security with that. Those are the kinds of jobs that you could do remotely, that you could start a company and tie in. And our universities are looking at those options, so that you could go and get a degree, get training, get a certificate, and then become a subcontractor on that. Like, that's exciting, right? You might decide that you want to become a small-time manufacturer of something, right? That you're going to be the latest in fashion. Well, fashion's hard because it costs too much. But you might be able to you get your 3D printer and you do the most cutest ever pop-up buttons, right? And everybody wants that. And you're able to do it because you have access to the marketplace through broadband, right? Your services, you might be the one who really can understand how to organize something for corporations in a way, because you've gone and got the training and got the degree, but you can do it remotely. People are doing investing remotely. They are. You see people just becoming very involved in the in the markets remotely. There's a lot of stuff, but if you don't have that broadband, you are not part of the new economy.
We've got Los Alamos. We've got Sandia. We've got the big labs. There's job openings there. Some of it can be done remotely as well. But are we going to be able to keep those labs going? Are we going to be able to keep them funded?
Yeah, the labs are going to do all right in this budget. So the president has sent out a budget for labs, for military. It's very it's very robust. But it increases for military, for the Department of Defense. Sadly, I call it the starvation budget because for almost everything else, he cuts it. For things that we rely on. Now, I don't think that budget will be what we get going. I think what we'll end up with is a budget that's closer to what we looked at in 2024. That will be what I'll be fighting for, because we need to remember we got to fund our veterans. We need to make sure the CBOC is funded. We need to make sure that we fund education. Like they really want to cut education, but the reality is your schools here in Raton rely on federal dollars for your K through 12 schools. Kids who want to go and get that training at the community colleges, at UNM, at Highlands, they might want those Pell grants to help them pay for that. And they want to, those are being cut. So a lot of the things that I think are essential to allow people to have a path to prosperity. I want you to be able to have that path to prosperity. We're going to help you get the education, get the certification you need, because that's the role that government plays. And then the business takes over. Because I want you to start those small businesses that make sense, because that's what a community needs. Now, what it looks like in each community, those are where we need to incentivize the entrepreneurs to be able to do that, where they look for those opportunities. Well,
for example, Maxwell is having a reduction in force. They had to let one elementary school teacher go because of their budget and the way it is setting this year. But they're only looking at just under 80 students total for the school, which, once again, that comes back to a big thing in New Mexico. You've got Roy and Mascaro. Those two schools in Harding County, barely 70 students, 60 students.
They get together and their teams play. They pool their students so they could have one team.
They have been.
And they win some championships.
Yeah, they have been able to do that. But at what point do those two schools have to look and say, hey, I know the politics in Harding County is quite interesting because it is such a small county population-wise, and you've got those two mixtures, but what point do those two schools have to say, hey, we're going to have to combine in order to do this? You've got Wagon Mound that is barely hanging on because of the lack of ranching and small families moving into these areas. Cimarron has a unique situation where they have their main school in Cimarron, and then at one point they had the charter school in Eagle Nest, and now they have almost like two separate schools between Cimarron and Eagle Nest. Of course, how are we going to make all that work? And in some of this stuff, we've got to get creative with funding, because the belt's going to have to tighten.
Right. And on those things, like I said, what the schools decide to do, what the school boards decide to do, very, important local decisions. The school system itself, very important state decisions. What the federal government does is we say, here are some areas that the states do not provide, but that the federal government has always historically provided. And it's those kinds of funds that are supplemental, that are the funding to low-income schools that do not have, they're not in wealthy neighborhoods, right? So we want to make sure that we give a little extra to those schools so that they can have a little bit more of an equal playing field to maybe a school in Los Alamos, right? We want to make sure that we give money to a school that needs it for working with children who might be disabled or have special needs. So that's where the federal government comes in, and we don't make decisions about local decisions. That's made at a local level. What the feds do, and what I want to preserve, is that extra level of funding to deal with these special issues that states have historically not been able to afford, and so the feds come in and do that. I don't want us to lose that, because the local school district can't make up for it. Like Ratone's schools, you can't make up for the money that comes from the federal government, both in, to assist because of the fact that their your student makeup is not as wealthy, or that you have special needs. And we want our special needs kids to be able to go to school and to be able to achieve their potential. What I want is all children to be able to achieve their potential and not to run into obstacles to that. We need to remove the obstacles so that that child can achieve his or her potential. And that's what the federal funding does.
Okay. I want to thank you very much for coming to Raton, for visiting with us. I do want to leave you with one little thing. You were born and raised New Mexican. You were born and raised American. I was born and raised New Mexican. I was born and raised American. The difference that we have is you have a Democratic label, I have a Republican label. Being pushed to vote a certain way because of a label it bothers me a little bit. But it's time to get rid of those labels. It's time to throw them away. We need to come together as Americans, as New Mexicans, and work together.
Well, if you notice, I might have that label, but when I sit here, I am not here as a candidate. I am here as your Congresswoman. And once I become your Congresswoman, I am here to talk to you and to listen to you. And I spend a lot of time in the Republican areas of my district, just as much as I spend in the Democrat areas of my district, because my job is to represent, is to listen. And so I do throw away those labels when I am here in my official capacity. And I love doing that, because that way I can hear, as I pointed out, the conservative woman who wanted to make sure I understood the rancher things. We agree precisely that we need to keep Medicaid for that. Now, I do not believe, I do think that the bill is bad because it raises the debt by $3 trillion. And I know that for most Republicans for a long time, they don't like raising the debt. And this raises it by $3 trillion. And that's why we have the Medicare cuts. So in this area, it's very interesting, because my opposition to the raising of the debt that much is very similar to many Republicans. Yeah. But I represent the entire district. But
I do. I hope that we can all come together and work together as Americans. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. This was marvelous. It was a wonderful conversation.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.